On a rainy afternoon in the heart of the city, the streets were alive with the chaos of honking cars and hurried pedestrians. Among the towering skyscrapers and gray clouds, Ethan Carter sat in the back seat of his sleek black car, staring blankly at his phone. Ethan was a billionaire architect, a man whose name was synonymous with success. He had designed some of the most iconic buildings in the world, yet as he sat there in his tailored suit, surrounded by luxury, he couldn't shake the emptiness that had settled deep within him. His life, though polished and perfect on the surface, felt cold and hollow. "I've built cities, shaped skylines, and earned more money than I could ever spend," Ethan thought to himself. "But somehow, I feel like I've built walls around myself instead of bridges to others. My life is a masterpiece of design, but it's empty." As the car came to a halt in traffic near a small farmer's market, Ethan's gaze wandered out the window. His eyes landed on a small flower stall tucked between the bustling vendors. It was a burst of color amidst the gray, vibrant and alive. Behind the stall stood a woman, her hands carefully arranging a bouquet of flowers. She was in her early 30s, with a calm yet focused expression that radiated quiet strength. Her name was Lila Bennett, a single mother working tirelessly to make ends meet. Beside her sat a young boy, no older than 6, scribbling on a piece of paper with a look of pure concentration. His laughter rang out, cutting through the noise of the city, and, for a moment, Ethan found himself captivated. In a world of steel and glass, she was a splash of color, Ethan thought. A reminder of something I'd forgotten, something real. For a moment, he hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who stopped for small things, let alone stepped out of his car in the middle of traffic. But something about the woman and her little stall drew him in. Without fully understanding why, he told his driver to pull over and stepped out into the rain. As Ethan approached the flower stall, Lila looked up, her expression polite but guarded. She was used to customers, but this man, his expensive suit, his confident demeanor felt out of place here. Ethan picked up a bouquet of roses, their deep red petals glistening with raindrops. "These are beautiful," he said, his voice calm but curious. "How much?" $20, Lila replied simply, her tone steady. Ethan pulled out a crisp $100 bill and handed it to her. "Keep the change," he said, almost absent-mindedly. But Lila shook her head, her voice firm yet kind. "I don't take charity. It's $20, or you can leave." Ethan was taken aback, unused to being refused. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he handed her the exact amount. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car, the bouquet in hand. As he settled into his seat, he glanced back at the stall. Lila was now leaning over to help her son with his drawing, her face softening as she smiled at him. "I didn't know it then," Ethan thought as the car pulled away. But that moment, those flowers, would change everything. The next day, Ethan found himself thinking about the flower stall more than he expected. The vibrant colors, the woman's quiet strength, and the boy's laughter had left an impression on him. It was strange. He had met countless people in his life, attended glamorous events, and worked with the most influential figures in the world, yet something about that small, unassuming stall had stayed with him. By mid-afternoon, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. He cleared his schedule and instructed his driver to take him back to the farmer's market. As the car pulled up, he spotted the familiar stall. Lila was there, arranging a fresh batch of flowers, her hands moving with practiced precision. Noah sat nearby, humming softly as he colored in a sketchbook. Ethan stepped out of the car, this time with a sense of purpose. As he approached, Lila looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Back again?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. Ethan smiled, picking up a bouquet of sunflowers. "I thought I'd brighten up my office," he said casually. Lila raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Sunflowers don't exactly scream corporate," she replied, a hint of humor in her voice. Ethan chuckled, appreciating her wit. "Maybe that's the point," he said, handing her the exact amount this time. As Leela wrapped the bouquet, Noah looked up from his sketchbook and studied Ethan curiously. "Are you a businessman?" the boy asked, his voice innocent and direct. Ethan crouched down to Noah's level, smiling warmly. "Something like that. I design buildings, big ones." Noah's eyes lit up. "Like skyscrapers?" "Exactly," Ethan replied. "What about you? What are you drawing?" Noah held up his sketchbook, revealing a colorful drawing of a small house surrounded by flowers. "This is our dream house," he said proudly. "Mom says one day we'll have a garden like this." Ethan glanced at Lila, who was now busy arranging another bouquet. Her face softened as she listened to her son, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "It's a beautiful dream," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "And I'm sure you'll make it happen." Noah beamed, and for a moment the three of them shared a quiet connection. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself drawn back to the market, each visit feeling less like a coincidence and more like a choice. He didn't just buy flowers, he lingered, talking to Lila and Noah, learning about their lives. Lila, though cautious, began to notice his sincerity, especially in the way he listened to Noah's stories and admired his drawings. One afternoon, as Ethan helped Leela rearrange some flowers that had fallen over, she finally asked, "Why do you keep coming back here? You don't seem like the kind of man who buys flowers every day." Ethan paused, caught off guard by her directness. "Maybe I just like the company," he said with a small smile. Lila looked at him for a moment, as if trying to read his intentions. "Well, as long as you're not here out of pity," she said firmly. "I don't need anyone feeling sorry for me." Ethan's expression softened. "I don't pity you, Lila. I admire you. You're doing something real, something meaningful. That's more than I can say for most people I know." Lila didn't respond right away, but his words seemed to resonate with her. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. As the sun began to set, Ethan prepared to leave. He turned to Noah and said, "Keep working on that dream house, okay? I want to see it when it's finished." Noah nodded enthusiastically, waving goodbye. But as Ethan walked away, Lila's smile faded slightly. She watched him go, a mix of gratitude and hesitation in her eyes. She couldn't deny that Ethan's presence had brought a sense of warmth and hope to her little stall, but a part of her still wondered, what did a man like him really want with someone like her? Over the next few days, Ethan found himself returning to the market more often than he cared to admit. Each time he bought a different bouquet, offering casual excuses like needing flowers for his office, his home, or a friend. Lila, though still cautious, began to notice his consistency. She also noticed how he always took the time to talk to Noah, crouching down to his level and asking about his drawings, or listening intently to his stories. Noah, in turn, seemed to light up whenever Ethan arrived, proudly showing him his latest sketches or asking questions about the buildings Ethan designed. One afternoon, as Ethan stood by the stall, helping Lila rearrange some flowers that had fallen over, she finally broke the silence. "Why do you keep coming back here?" she asked, her tone curious but firm. "You don't seem like the kind of man who buys flowers every day." Ethan paused, caught off guard by her directness. He glanced at her, then at the bouquet in his hands before replying with a small smile. "Maybe I just like the company." Lila raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Well, as long as you're not here out of pity," she said, her voice steady. "I don't need anyone feeling sorry for me." Ethan's expression softened as he looked at her. "I don't pity you, Lila. I admire you. You're doing something real, something meaningful. That's more than I can say for most people I know." Lila didn't respond right away, but his words seemed to linger in the air between them. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile that caught Ethan by surprise. It was a small moment, but it felt significant, as if a wall between them had started to crack. As the days passed, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Ethan learned that Lila had moved to the city 6 years ago, shortly after Noah was born. Her husband had left them with nothing, forcing her to start over from scratch. She had always loved flowers, so she began selling them at the market to support herself and her son. It wasn't easy, but she took pride in her work and in the life she was building for Noah. Ethan, in turn, shared glimpses of his own life. He told her about his career as an architect, the buildings he had designed, and the accolades he had received. But he also admitted that, despite all his success, he often felt like something was missing. "I've spent my whole life building things," he said one evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky. "But I've never really built a life for myself." Leela listened quietly, her hands busy arranging a bouquet of lilies. "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places," she said softly, glancing up at him. Ethan smiled at her words, but before he could respond, Noah ran up to him, holding out his sketchbook. "Look, Mr. Ethan," he exclaimed. "I finished the garden for the dream house." Ethan crouched down to examine the drawing. It was a colorful, whimsical design, with flowers blooming in every corner and a small house nestled in the middle. "This is amazing, Noah," he said sincerely. "You've got a real talent." Noah beamed at the compliment, and Lila couldn't help but smile as she watched them. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, as if the three of them were in their own little world. But that peace was soon interrupted. One afternoon, as Ethan was helping Lila set up her stall, a man approached them. He was tall and rough-looking, with a smirk that immediately put Ethan on edge. Lila's face hardened as she recognized him. "Ryan," she said, her voice cold. The man crossed his arms, his gaze flicking between Lila and Ethan. "So this is what you've been up to?" he said mockingly. "Selling flowers and cozying up to rich guys?" Ethan straightened, his jaw tightening. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Ryan smirked. "I'm her husband, or at least I used to be." Leela's hands clenched at her sides. "What do you want, Ryan?" she demanded. Ryan's smirk widened, his voice dripping with mockery. "Just thought I'd stop by and see my boy. Looks like you've been busy playing house." Leela's hands clenched into fists, her voice trembling with anger. "You don't get to call him your son. You abandoned us, Ryan. You don't belong here." Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's right. You gave up that right a long time ago. If you're here to cause trouble, I suggest you leave now." His steady presence seemed to anchor Lila, and for the first time, Ryan's smirk faltered. Ryan noticed the movement and sneered. "What, you think you can just step in and play hero?" he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Ethan met his gaze evenly. "I'm not playing anything," he said calmly. "But I won't stand by and let you intimidate her." Ryan's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see about that," he said, before turning and walking away. As he disappeared into the crowd, Lila let out a shaky breath. Ethan turned to her, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" Lila nodded, though her expression was strained. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "Thank you." Ethan wanted to say more, to reassure her, but he could sense that she needed space. As he left the market that day, he couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's return was just the beginning of something bigger. In the days that followed, the tension from Ryan's sudden appearance lingered in the air. Lila tried to focus on her work, arranging flowers and keeping her stall running, but Ethan could see the worry etched on her face. She was quieter than usual, her usual spark dimmed by the weight of her thoughts. Noah, too young to fully understand the situation, continued to chatter happily with Ethan whenever he visited, but even he seemed to sense that something was wrong. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the encounter with Ryan. The man's smug attitude and the way he had tried to intimidate Lila didn't sit well with him. He wanted to help, but he also knew that Lila was fiercely independent. She had made it clear from the beginning that she didn't want pity or charity, and Ethan respected that. Still, he couldn't stand the thought of her facing this alone. One afternoon, as Ethan stood by the stall, he finally decided to bring it up. "Lila," he said gently, "if you ever need help with anything, You can tell me. You don't have to do this alone." Lila looked up from the bouquet she was wrapping, her expression guarded. "I appreciate that, Ethan," she said after a moment. "But I've been handling things on my own for a long time. I can't rely on anyone else." Ethan nodded, understanding her hesitation. "I get it," he said, "but just so you know, I'm here, for you and for Noah." Lila's eyes softened slightly, and for a moment she looked like she might say something more. But before she could, Noah ran up to them, holding a small bunch of wildflowers he had picked from a nearby patch. "Look, Mom," he said excitedly. "I made my own bouquet." Lila smiled, her tension easing as she knelt down to admire her son's creation. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm. Ethan watched the interaction, his heart swelling at the sight. He had never thought much about family before, but seeing Lila and Noah together made him realize how much he had been missing. But the peace was short-lived. A few days later, Ryan returned, this time with a lawyer in tow. He approached Lila's stall with a smug grin, holding a stack of papers in his hand. "I'm filing for custody of Noah," he announced, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby vendors. Lila froze, her face pale. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling. Ryan shrugged. "I have every right to see my son," he said. "And with the way you're living, I'm sure the court will agree that he'd be better off with me." Ethan, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. "You abandoned them," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't get to walk back into their lives and make demands." Ryan turned to him, his smirk fading. "This isn't your business," he snapped. "Is now," Ethan replied, his tone steady. Lila looked between the two men, her hands shaking as she clutched the edge of her stall. "Ryan, please," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. Noah doesn't even know you." Ryan's expression hardened. "We'll see what the court has to say about that," he said before turning and walking away, leaving Lila standing there, stunned. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle. "We'll fight this," he said quietly. "You're not alone in this, Lila." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't have the money for a lawyer, and I can't risk losing Noah." Ethan's gaze was steady as he said, "Then let me help. I know you don't want charity, but this isn't about that. This is about protecting your son." Lila hesitated, her pride warring with her fear. Finally, she nodded, her voice trembling as she said, "Okay, thank you, Ethan." Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into helping Lila prepare for the custody battle. He hired a top lawyer to represent her and worked tirelessly to gather evidence of Ryan's neglect and absence from Noah's life. Lila, though still hesitant to rely on him, began to see that Ethan's support wasn't about pity, it was about genuine care. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Ethan became a constant presence in Lila and Noah's lives, helping at the stall, playing with Noah, and offering quiet reassurances when Lila felt overwhelmed. Slowly but surely, Lila began to trust him, letting down the walls she had built around herself. The day of the court hearing arrived, and Lila was a bundle of nerves as she sat in the courtroom, clutching Ethan's hand for support. Ryan's lawyer tried to paint her as an unfit mother, but the evidence of his absence and neglect was overwhelming. In the end, the judge ruled in Lila's favor, granting her full custody of Noah. As they left the courthouse, Lila turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to," Ethan replied, his voice soft. "I just want you and Noah to be happy." For the first time in a long time, Lila felt a sense of hope. She looked at Ethan, realizing that he wasn't just a man who had stepped into her life, he was someone she could truly rely on. In the weeks following the court victory, life began to settle into a new rhythm for Lila and Noah. The weight of Ryan's threats had lifted, and for the first time in years, Lila felt like she could breathe. Her flower stall was busier than ever, thanks in part to Ethan's frequent visits and the quiet encouragement he gave her to expand her business. One afternoon, as Lila was arranging a bouquet of tulips, Ethan arrived at the stall with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he began, leaning casually against the counter. "You've got something special here, Lila. Your flowers, your talent. It deserves more than just this little stall." Lila looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What are you saying?" Ethan smiled, pulling out a small folder from under his arm. "I've been working on something, just an idea, really." He opened the folder to reveal a set of architectural sketches. Lila's eyes widened as she took in the drawings. A charming, cozy flower shop with large windows, a small garden out front, and a sign that read, "Lila's Bloom." "Ethan," she began, her voice trailing off as she stared at the designs. "I know you've always dreamed of having your own shop," Ethan said, his tone gentle but excited. "And I want to help you make it happen. I've already found a location. It's perfect. Sunny, lots of foot traffic, and plenty of space for you to grow." Lila shook her head, overwhelmed. "Ethan, it's too much. I can't accept this." Ethan reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "Lila, this isn't charity. This is an investment in you. You've worked so hard to build something beautiful, and I want to help you take it to the next level. You deserve this." Lila hesitated, her mind racing. She had spent years building her life brick by brick, refusing to rely on anyone but herself. Yet as she looked at Ethan's earnest expression and the sketches of the shop she had always dreamed of, a flicker of hope broke through her doubt. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to let someone in? After a long pause, she finally nodded, a small smile breaking through her uncertainty. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's do it." Ethan's face lit up, and for the first time Lila allowed herself to feel the full weight of her dream coming true. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan worked tirelessly to bring the shop to life, overseeing the renovations and ensuring every detail was perfect. Lila, though still hesitant to rely on him, found herself swept up in the excitement. She spent hours planning the layout, choosing flowers, and envisioning how the shop would look once it was finished. Noah, too, was thrilled. He loved visiting the construction site with Ethan, watching as the space transformed into something magical. "It's like our dream house, Mom," he exclaimed one day, holding up one of his old drawings. Lila smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt like she was building a future not just for herself, but for Noah as well. Finally, the big day arrived. The shop was ready, and Ethan had planned a small opening celebration. Lila stood outside the shop staring at the sign that now bore her name. The windows were filled with vibrant bouquets, and the garden out front was blooming with color. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. As the sun began to set, Ethan approached her, holding a single red rose. "You did it," he said, his voice warm. Lila turned to him, her eyes glistening with tears. "No, Ethan, we did it. I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan smiled, his gaze steady. "I told you, Lila, I believe in you." The two of them stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken emotion. Before either of them could say anything more, Noah ran up, holding a small bouquet he had made himself. "Mom! Mr. Ethan! Look what I made!" Lila laughed, scooping her son into her arms. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said, kissing his cheek. Ethan watched them, his heart full. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something real, something that mattered. As the evening wore on, the celebration continued, but Ethan had one more surprise planned. He asked Lila to step outside with him, away from the crowd. The night was quiet, the stars twinkling above them. "Lila," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I've spent my whole life building things, skyscrapers, offices, homes, but none of it ever felt like it mattered. Not until I met you. Lila's breath caught in her throat as Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a delicate ring, simple yet elegant, just like her. "I don't just want to help you build a shop," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "I want to build a life with you. You and Noah mean everything to me. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Lila's face as she nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Ethan." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time in years, Lila felt truly whole. Inside the shop, Noah peeked out the window, grinning as he watched the two of them embrace. "Does this mean Mr. Ethan is going to be my dad?" he asked one of the guests. The guest chuckled. "I think so, kiddo." As the night went on, the three of them stood together under the stars, their hearts full of love and hope. It was Valentine's Day, and for the first time Lila felt like she had found her forever. As another year passed, Valentine's Day arrived once again, a day that now held a special place in Lila's heart. It marked not just a celebration of love, but a reminder of how far she, Ethan, and Noah had come together. The flower shop was bustling with customers, each one eager to buy bouquets for their loved ones. Lila worked tirelessly, her hands moving quickly as she wrapped roses, tulips, and lilies in delicate paper. The shop was filled with the sweet scent of flowers and the hum of happy chatter. Ethan arrived in the late afternoon, carrying a small box of chocolates and a single red rose. He leaned against the counter, watching Lila with a soft smile as she helped a customer. When she finally turned to him, her face lit up. "Happy Valentine's Day," he said, handing her the rose. Lila took it, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Happy Valentine's Day," she replied, her voice warm. Ethan glanced around the shop, taking in the vibrant displays and the cheerful atmosphere. "You've really created something amazing here," he said. "I'm so proud of you." Lila smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. As the day wound down and the last customer left, Ethan surprised Lila and Noah with a special dinner he had prepared at home. The three of them sat around the table, laughing and sharing stories, the warmth of their little family filling the room. After dinner, Ethan stood and cleared his throat, drawing Lila's attention. "I have one more surprise," he said, reaching into his pocket. Lila's eyes widened as he pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart raced as he opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "This is for you," Ethan said, his voice steady, "to remind you of how much you mean to me. You've given me a life I never thought I'd have, a family, a home, and a love that's real. I wanted to give you something to show how much I treasure you." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she took the necklace, her hands trembling slightly. "Ethan, it's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan stepped behind her, gently fastening the necklace around her neck. "Not as beautiful as you," he said softly. Noah, watching from the couch, grinned. "You guys are so mushy," he teased, though his smile showed how happy he was to see his mom so loved. Lila laughed, wiping her tears as she pulled Ethan into a hug. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Ethan held her close, his heart full. "Thank you for letting me be part of your life," he replied. As the evening came to a close, the three of them sat together on the couch, watching the stars twinkle outside the window. Lila leaned against Ethan, her hand resting on his, while Noah dozed off beside them. For the first time in years, Valentine's Day wasn't just another day on the calendar, it was a celebration of everything Lila had gained. As she sat on the couch with Ethan's arm around her and Noah curled up beside them, she realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about the quiet moments, the laughter, and the unwavering support of the people who chose to stay. This was her family, her future, and her forever. And as she looked at Ethan and Noah, she knew that this was the greatest gift of all. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story on Emma's Stories. Life is full of unexpected twists, and sometimes it's the smallest moments that lead to the biggest changes. If this story inspired you, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Let us know in the comments what's a moment in your life that changed everything. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Until next time, remember, love and hope are always closer than you think.